All right, let's talk about one of the biggest questions for anyone with a great idea. How do you figure out if that amazing concept you've been thinking about can actually become a real, successful project? Let's dive right in.
So you've got it, right? That little spark, that idea that you just know could change the whole game, completely disrupt an industry, or maybe even solve a massive problem. It feels pretty unstoppable, doesn't it? Okay, but here comes the reality check. All that excitement is awesome, but it's not a shield against all the things that can go wrong. You know, every new idea is like walking through a minefield of potential risks. So, the real question is, how do you navigate that minefield before you've put your time, your money, and, hey, your reputation on the line?
Well, the answer is you need a blueprint, a pre-launch blueprint. Before you even think about writing code or signing a lease, you need a solid plan to test your idea against the real world. And that plan? It's called a feasibility study.
Now, our source material actually calls this a magical tool, and honestly, I love that, because that's what it is. A feasibility study is basically your crystal ball. It's a way to kind of peek into the future of your project and see if it's practical, if it's going to be profitable, and if it's even worth doing in the first place.
What's so powerful about this is that it forces you to answer the really tough questions right at the beginning. This isn't about some vague gut feeling. It's about getting real, concrete answers. You know, what's my ROI going to look like? What are the biggest risks here? And maybe the biggest one of all, does anyone actually want this thing? Answering all that leads to the single most important decision you can make, a very clear go or no-go.
So, how do we get to that big go or no-go decision? Well, we can break the whole thing down into 5 key areas. Think of them as the 5 pillars of feasibility. They're basically the 5 essential questions you absolutely have to answer before you launch anything. First up, we've got the most fundamental question of them all: technical feasibility. It's super simple, really direct, and totally non-negotiable. It boils down to this: can you actually build it? Do you have the skills, the tools, and the resources to make this idea a reality?
And that means looking at everything. Do you have the right hardware, the right software? Is it all going to play nice together? But, crucially, it's also about your people. Does your team have the skills to pull this off? If not, can you hire the right people? And don't forget the boring but important stuff like logistics and your website. Can your current setup even handle what you're planning?
Okay, let's move on to our second pillar, because this is where it gets interesting: economic feasibility. This one's all about the value. Once you add up all the costs and all the potential benefits, is this whole thing truly worth the effort?
To figure that out, you have to do a serious cost-benefit analysis. I mean, you've got to tally up every single potential cost: tech, hiring, marketing, the whole shebang. Then you weigh all that against the benefits. And here's the absolute key: if those benefits don't seriously outweigh the costs, the project might just be a bad investment, even if you can technically afford to do it.
And you know, this perfectly explains something that trips a lot of people up. They sound similar, but they're not the same at all. See, economic feasibility asks, is it worth it? It's about value and return. But financial feasibility, our next pillar, asks a totally different question. Can we afford it? It's all about whether you have the actual cash.
So that brings us right to pillar number 3, financial feasibility. This is where the rubber really meets the road, because it's all about the money. Plain and simple, do you have the cash, or can you get the cash to fund this project from day one all the way to the finish line? So for this one, your checklist is all about the dollars and cents. What are your startup costs? Where is the funding actually going to come from? Are we talking investors, loans, your life savings? And what are the financial risks? This is all about making sure you have enough fuel in the tank to get your rocket off the launch pad. Okay, so you can build it, and you can afford it. That's great. But that leads us to our 4th pillar. And honestly, this might be the most important one of all: market feasibility. The huge question here is, does anybody actually care? Is there a real group of paying customers out there for what you're selling? This is where you have to get out of your own head and really get into the marketplace. You've got to study the industry, spy on your competitors, and most importantly, truly understand who your customer is. All that research is what lets you create realistic sales projections, not just, wishful thinking. And finally, our 5th pillar kind of brings it all back home: operational feasibility. This is all about the internal fit. Your idea could be technically brilliant, a financial winner, and have a massive market. But will it actually work inside your company? This is about the people and the processes.
Do you have your boss's support? Is your team ready for this kind of change? And you have to think about the legal stuff too, like government regulations. A project can totally fail just because it doesn't fit the culture or the skills of the very company trying to launch it.
So after you've dug into all 5 of these pillars, you're going to have this incredible 360-degree view of your project. And all of that hard work, all that analysis, it all leads to one single powerful moment, making that final call.
So let's boil it all down into a super simple 4-step plan. Step 1. Be crystal clear on the problem you're solving. 2. Investigate all 5 of those pillars we just talked about. 3. Be brutally honest about the risks you found. And finally, step 4, based on everything you've learned, you make the call. You either proceed with confidence, pivot to a new plan, or you pause and go back to the drawing board.
And there you have it. That's the framework for putting any idea to the test. So I'll leave you with this to think about. As you're sitting there dreaming about your own big project, which of these 5 questions is the very first one you need to ask?